Captain Naomi Harrison stood at the observation deck of Deep Space Mining Station Epsilon 7, watching the distant stars through reinforced plasteel windows. 20 years of deep space experience hadn't dulled her appreciation for the vast emptiness that surrounded them, though it had taught her to respect its dangers. The station's proximity to the Kuiper Belt made it an ideal location for mining operations, but its isolation meant they were often on their own when trouble struck. "Captain, we're picking up an unusual energy signature," Lieutenant James O'Neill's voice crackled through the comm system. "About 3,000 kilometers off our starboard side. It's like nothing in our database." Harrison was already moving toward the command center, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." "It's pulsing, ma'am. Regular intervals, but the energy pattern doesn't match any known propulsion system." "Wait," there was a pause. "We're getting visual now." The main screen flickered to life as Harrison entered the command center. The object that appeared made her stop in her tracks. It was roughly cylindrical, but its surface seemed to ripple like liquid metal, despite clearly being a solid structure. Bands of light pulsed along its length in a regular pattern that seemed almost deliberate. "Is it a signal?" Harrison asked, though she already suspected the answer. Chief Engineer Raj Patel leaned forward at his console, his dark eyes reflecting the dancing lights on his screens. "If it is, it's not using any frequency we recognize. But those pulses, they're too regular to be natural." "Ma'am," O'Neill's voice was tense. "The object's trajectory, it's not stable. And those energy readings are spiking in a way that suggests containment failure," Patel finished. "Whatever that ship is, and yes, I think it's definitely a ship, it's in serious trouble." Harrison felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. First contact scenarios were something they trained for, but never truly expected. And first contact with a ship in distress? That added layers of complexity that no training manual could fully prepare them for. "Options?" she asked, her eyes never leaving the screen. "We could try to establish communication," O'Neill suggested. "But without knowing their language or technology." "No time," Patel cut in. "Those energy spikes are following an exponential curve. If it's what I think it is, a cascade failure in their power system, we've got maybe 2 hours before it goes critical. And if that happens this close to the station." Harrison nodded grimly. "Then we need to act now. Prep the emergency response shuttle. Patel, you're with me. O'Neill, coordinate from here and keep trying to establish contact. And get Dr. Yuki on the line. If we're about to meet our first aliens, we might need our xenobiologist." As they rushed to prepare for the rescue mission, Harrison couldn't help but think about the irony. Humanity had spent centuries looking to the stars, hoping for first contact. Now it was about to happen not through careful diplomatic channels or scientific exchange, but in the midst of an emergency that threatened both species. The rescue shuttle hummed to life around them as Harrison and her team suited up. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the station's xenobiologist, was already running scenarios on her tablet. "We need to be prepared for anything," she warned. "Different atmospheric requirements, different gravity tolerances, possibly even different concepts of what constitutes help. Right now, I'll settle for them not shooting us when we try to dock," Harrison replied, checking her suit seals one final time. The journey to the alien vessel seemed to take both forever and no time at all. As they drew closer, the true scale of the ship became apparent. It was roughly twice the size of their shuttle, with what appeared to be some kind of docking mechanism that, miraculously, wasn't entirely incompatible with their own systems. "Universe has a sense of humor," Patel muttered as he worked to establish a seal between the vessels. "Or maybe there are only so many ways to design an airlock." The moment of truth came as they prepared to board. Harrison took a deep breath, checking her team one last time. "Remember, we're here to help. Whatever we find on the other side of that door, we represent humanity. Let's make it count. The airlock cycled, and they stepped into history. The interior of the alien vessel was bathed in a soft, pulsing light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The architecture was organic, with corridors that curved and flowed like river channels. But what immediately caught their attention was the atmosphere, or rather, the lack of it. "The ship's been vented," Patel reported, checking his instruments. "But these readings, there's some kind of energy field maintaining minimal life support. It's failing, but it's ingenious." Before Harrison could respond, movement caught her eye. A figure emerged from around a curved bulkhead, and humanity had its first glimpse of another intelligent species. The being was tall and slender, with a crystalline quality to its silvery skin that seemed to catch and reflect the pulsing light. Its movements were fluid, almost graceful, despite what was clearly physical distress. The alien raised what appeared to be an appendage, making a series of complex gestures. A holographic display appeared in the air between them, showing what was unmistakably the ship's power core in a state of critical failure. Harrison didn't hesitate. She pointed to herself, then to the power core display, then made a repair gesture that she hoped would be understood across species barriers. The alien's crystalline surface shifted colors, from silver to a deep blue, and it nodded, or made a motion that seemed very much like a nod. "Well," Harrison said through her suit's calm, "looks like some things really are universal. Let's get to work." The next 2 hours would prove to be among the most intense and remarkable of their lives, as human and alien worked side by side to prevent a disaster that would have claimed them all. And in doing so, they began writing a new chapter in the history of both their species. Inside the alien vessel, time seemed to flow differently. Captain Harrison watched as Patel worked alongside their crystalline companion, their movements forming an improvised dance of technical cooperation. The alien, whom they had started calling Azure due to its current coloring, had an uncanny ability to anticipate their needs, often presenting tools before they even asked for them. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Tanaka whispered over the comm, her tablet working overtime to record everything. "Their entire biology seems to shift based on emotional and intellectual states. The color changes aren't just surface level, they're conducting information through their entire crystalline structure." Harrison nodded, but her attention was focused on the failing power core. The holographic displays showed an increasingly critical situation, with cascading failures threatening to tear the ship apart. Azure's movements had become more urgent, its surface rippling with patterns of deep purple and electric blue. "Captain," Patel called out, his voice tense. "We've got a problem. Their power system, it's not just advanced, it's fundamentally different from anything we've ever worked with. It's like they're using crystalline matrices to channel energy in ways that shouldn't be possible." Azure must have sensed their confusion. Its surface shifted to a new pattern, and suddenly the holographic display transformed into a three-dimensional model of the ship's power system. But instead of traditional engineering schematics, it showed what looked like a complex musical score, with waves and patterns that flowed and intersected. Dr. Tanaka's breath caught. Of course. They don't think in terms of mechanical systems, they think in harmonics and resonance. Their entire technology is based on vibration patterns and energy flows. Patel's eyes widened behind his faceplate. Like crystals singing, but on a quantum level. That's why our traditional diagnostic tools couldn't make sense of it. He turned to Azure. "Can you show us the current resonance pattern?" The alien surface rippled with what might have been approval, and the hologram shifted again. Now they could see where the harmonics were breaking down, creating dangerous interference patterns that threatened to shatter the crystal matrix at the core of their power system. "It's like an orchestra playing out of tune," Harrison mused, watching the patterns clash and distort. Each section fighting against the others instead of working together. Azure's color shifted to a bright gold, and its appendages moved in an excited pattern. More of its kind had begun to emerge from other parts of the ship, drawn by the activity around the core. Each new arrival added their own subtle variations to the holographic display, building a more complete picture of the crisis they faced. "They're not just showing us the problem," Tanaka realized, her voice filled with wonder. "They're trying to teach us their language, their way of understanding technology and energy. Look at how the patterns repeat and build on each other." Harrison made a decision. "Patel, could we adapt our emergency power couplings to act as resonance stabilizers? Not to power their systems, but to help dampen the destructive interference?" The engineer was already running calculations. "Maybe, but we'd need to match their frequency exactly, or we could make things worse. And our equipment wasn't designed for this kind of precision tuning." That's when one of the newer aliens stepped forward. Its crystalline surface was a deeper, more metallic shade, and its movement spoke of authority. It reached out and touched one of their power couplings, and its surface briefly matched the device's power signature perfectly. "They can mimic our technology's resonance," Patel exclaimed. "If we work together, our power couplings providing the base frequency, and their ability to fine-tune it." The next hour was a blur of activity as humans and aliens worked in concert, creating a hybrid system that had never existed before. The humans provided the raw power and basic framework, while the aliens used their unique abilities to shape and direct the energy flows. It was like watching two entirely different musical traditions blend into something entirely new and beautiful. As they worked, other forms of communication began to develop. The aliens learned to modulate their color patterns in ways that humans could more easily interpret, while the humans began to recognize the subtle variations in crystalline resonance that conveyed meaning. Dr. Tanaka's tablet was filling with notes on what she called harmonic linguistics, an entirely new field of xenolinguistics born of crisis. When the final connections were made, and the power core's destructive resonance patterns finally stabilized, the relief was palpable across species barriers. The alien surfaces rippled with waves of gold and silver, creating patterns that somehow conveyed both gratitude and joy. "Beautiful," Harrison breathed, watching the harmonized energy flows on the holographic display. "It's like we created a new kind of music together." Azure approached her, its surface shifting through a complex series of patterns that Dr. Tanaka's hastily assembled translation algorithm interpreted as something like, "In crisis, truth. In harmony, understanding." The senior alien, whom they had started calling titanium for its metallic sheen, made a gesture that caused all the holographic displays to merge into a single image, a representation of their two ships, connected not just physically but by flowing patterns of energy in resonance. "I think," Dr. Tanaka said softly, "they're showing us that this is just the beginning. That what we've created here goes beyond just fixing their power core." Harrison looked at the display, then at the assembled beings around her, human and alien, each so different yet now bound together by what they had accomplished. "Then let's make sure we get it right. Because I have a feeling this is going to change everything." As if in response, the power core hummed with a new harmony, its crystal matrices now glowing with a steady, peaceful light that seemed to promise a future neither species could have imagined just hours before. The warning came just 3 hours after they had stabilized the alien vessel's power core. Lieutenant O'Neill's voice crackled through the comm system with an urgency that made Harrison's blood run cold. "Captain, we've got a massive solar event building in the system's primary. The readings, they're off the charts. This isn't just a normal flare, it's going to make the Carrington event look like a spark from a lighter." Harrison watched as both human and alien crews reacted to the news. The crystalline being's surfaces had shifted to deep, worried crimsons, while Patel was already pulling up sensor data on his tablet. The translation algorithms they'd been developing caught fragments of harmonic communication between the aliens, their version of urgent whispers. "How long?" Harrison demanded, already moving toward the command center they'd improvised between the two ships. 30 minutes, maybe less. The magnetic field distortions are already starting to affect our long-range communications. We can't even get a warning out to Central Command." Titanium, the senior alien, stepped forward. Its surface rippled with complex patterns that their hastily assembled translation system rendered as, "Our shields cannot withstand such force. Not even at full power. And yours are even weaker," Harrison finished grimly. The mining station's shields were designed for asteroid protection, not for defending against a stellar apocalypse. "We need options, people. Fast." That's when Azure's surface suddenly shifted to a brilliant white, its patterns moving so quickly that the translators couldn't keep up. It reached out and merged several holographic displays, showing both ships' shield systems, the power core they just repaired, and what appeared to be a theoretical energy distribution model. Patel leaned forward, his eyes widening. "They want to combine our shield systems? Is that even possible?" Dr. Tanaka was already analyzing the aliens' proposal. "Look at the resonance patterns. They're suggesting we use what we learned about harmonic integration during the power core crisis, but on a much larger scale. It's never been done," titanium's patterns conveyed, but there was something else in its crystalline harmonics, hope, mixed with determination. Harrison looked at the crews around her, human and alien, each so different yet now facing extinction together unless they could find a way to cooperate on an unprecedented scale. "We've got 25 minutes to make history. Again. Let's make them count." What followed was a frenzy of activity that would later be studied in engineering schools across two civilizations. Humans and aliens worked side by side, their earlier experience with the power core serving as a crash course in cross-species cooperation. Patel and Azure coordinated the technical integration, while Dr. Tanaka and a group of aliens worked to refine their translation algorithms in real time, ensuring crucial technical details weren't lost in translation. "The trick," Patel explained as they worked, "is to use our shield generators to provide the raw power, while their crystalline technology shapes and directs the field. Their ability to manipulate energy through resonance patterns is light years ahead of ours, but they can't generate the kind of brute force our systems can." Harrison watched as massive power cables were run between the ships, their human-made conductors now wrapped in crystalline lattices that pulsed with alien energy. The aliens themselves had spread out across both vessels, their bodies serving as living resonance regulators, fine-tuning the energy flows in ways no human technology could match. 5 minutes to impact, O'Neill's voice warned. The first waves of radiation were already washing over them, making instruments flicker and causing static in their communications. "Shield integration at 89%, Patel reported, his fingers flying over his controls. "We need more power." "Divert everything," Harrison ordered. "Life support, artificial gravity, everything except emergency systems. We can survive a few hours without them if we have to." The aliens seemed to understand the concept of all-or-nothing gambles. Their ship systems began shutting down one by one, channeling every available bit of energy into their joint shield effort. The crystalline beings' surfaces now glowed with intense light as they pushed their natural abilities to the limit, acting as living conductors for the massive energies they were attempting to control. 1 minute. O'Neill's voice was barely audible through the increasing interference. Harrison watched as the combined shield shimmed into existence around both ships. It was like nothing she'd ever seen, a swirling, iridescent barrier that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. The alien crystalline technology had taken their crude force field and transformed it into something that looked more like living light. "Brace for impact," Harrison called out in English, while Azure broadcast the same warning in crystalline harmonics that resonated through both ships. The solar storm hit like the fist of an angry god. The shield lit up with energies that their sensors couldn't even measure, ancient stellar fury meeting desperately improvised technology. Every human and alien aboard felt the impact in their bones, or crystal matrices, as unimaginable forces tested the limits of their cooperation. "Shield stability at 60%. Patel shouted over the roar of overloading systems. "The resonance patterns are starting to degrade." That's when something remarkable happened. The aliens, led by Azure, began to sing. There was no other word for it, their crystalline bodies vibrated in perfect harmony, creating patterns of energy that reinforced the failing shield resonance. Without prompting, Dr. Tanaka grabbed her tablet and began mapping the frequencies. Harmonic reinforcement, she called out. They're manually stabilizing the field patterns. We need to match their frequency with our power output. Harrison didn't hesitate. All crews, sync your power pulses to Dr. Tanaka's frequency pattern. Think of it like keeping time with their music. Human technology and alien harmonics merged into something entirely new, a symphony of survival played out against the backdrop of a stellar tempest. The shield's color stabilized, its patterns flowing more smoothly as two very different approaches to manipulating energy found a common rhythm. Minutes stretched into hours as the storm raged around them. Equipment burned out and was replaced, aliens rotated shifts as their crystalline forms approached their limits, and humans worked through exhaustion, all while maintaining the delicate balance that kept them alive. When the storm finally began to wane, both crews were nearly spent. But as the last wave of radiation washed over their weakened but still functioning shield, a cheer went up that transcended species barriers. Human voices and alien harmonics joined in a celebration of shared survival. Harrison found herself standing next to Azure, watching as their combined crews began the process of damage assessment. The alien surface had faded to a tired but satisfied blue-silver. "We did more than survive a storm today," Harrison said, knowing the alien would understand if not her words, then her intent. "We proved that we're stronger together than apart." Azure's response came through their improved translation system. "In harmony, there is strength beyond the sum of its parts. This is a lesson both our peoples needed to learn." Looking at the crews working together, their earlier divisions forgotten in the wake of shared triumph, Harrison couldn't help but agree. They had come through trial by fire, literally, and emerged with something precious. Proof that different species could not only coexist but combine their strengths in ways that made them both better. 6 months after the solar storm incident, the space around Epsilon 7 had transformed. Where once there had been only a solitary mining station, now a joint construction project stretched across the void, humanity's first collaborative space station with an alien species. The crystalline beings, who had formally introduced themselves as the Resonant Collective, had chosen to make this system their first point of permanent contact with humanity. Captain Harrison stood in the newly completed observation dome, watching as teams of humans and resonants worked together on the station's outer hull. The crystalline beings moved through space with natural grace, their bodies immune to the cold vacuum, while human engineers in their bulky suits followed close behind, installing the hybrid technology that had grown out of their crisis-born cooperation. "Remarkable how far we've come," Admiral Chen's hologram said from the communication pedestal beside her. The United Earth Space Command had taken a keen interest in the project, though not everyone back on Earth shared their enthusiasm. From emergency rescue to joint space station in half a year. "Some people think we're moving too fast." Harrison watched as Azure, now the official resonant liaison, guided a team installing one of their crystalline power matrices into a human-designed housing. "With respect, Admiral, those people weren't here during the storm. They didn't see what we can accomplish together." "I understand, Captain. But there are concerns. The resonance technology, their ability to interface directly with energy systems, some see it as a potential threat." Before Harrison could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. "Fear often precedes understanding." Titanium emerged from a nearby corridor, its surface shimmering with the deeper, more complex patterns they'd learned indicated thoughtful discourse. The translation systems had improved dramatically, thanks to Dr. Tanaka's ongoing work with the resonant linguists. Administrator Titanium, Admiral Chen acknowledged. "We were just discussing the progress of the station. And the concerns of those who see change as threat," Titanium added. Its patterns shifted to what they'd learned was subtle amusement. "We have similar voices among our own people. They ask why we choose to work with beings who still rely on physical tools rather than direct energy manipulation. Harrison smiled slightly. I suppose fear of the unknown is universal. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Patel in engineering. Captain, we've got a situation in the new hybrid power core. Some kind of resonance destabilization, and it's not an accident. Harrison was moving before he finished speaking, titanium close behind. They reached the engineering section to find a scene of barely contained chaos. The central power core, a massive crystalline structure housed within a framework of human technology, was pulsing with erratic patterns of energy. Two resonants lay on the deck, their surfaces clouded and dull, while several human technicians were being treated for energy burns. Sabotage, Patel reported grimly, showing them his readings. Someone deliberately introduced a destructive resonance pattern into the core. If the resonance hadn't detected it immediately, both our peoples would have suffered. Titanium finished, its surface darkening with concern. Security footage revealed the culprits, a small group of both humans and resonants, working together in their opposition to the alliance. They had believed that by causing a catastrophic failure, they could prove that the two species were too different to cooperate safely. The irony, Dr. Tanaka noted later during the emergency meeting, is that they had to cooperate across species lines to attempt their sabotage. They proved the opposite of what they intended. The next few days were tense as both human and resonant authorities began investigations. But something unexpected emerged from the crisis. The joint emergency response teams, formed in the chaos of their first meeting and refined during the solar storm, proved just as effective at preventing disaster this time. More importantly, the incident brought to light the deep connections that had already formed between the two species. We should be open about this, Harrison argued in a joint session with both human and resonant leadership. Show everyone how our differences make us stronger, not weaker. The saboteurs tried to use our most advanced joint project against us. Let's turn it into a symbol of why we need each other. Azure, its surface rippling with supportive patterns, added, our very inability to directly replicate each other's strengths forces us to innovate, to find new solutions neither species would discover alone. The response was the creation of the Harmony Initiative, a new joint program that would actively seek out areas where human and resonant capabilities complemented each other. The station itself was renamed Harmony Point, its hybrid design now celebrated as a testament to cross-species cooperation. Harrison found herself working closely with Azure and Titanium to implement the new protocols. They developed training programs that paired human engineers with resonant energy shapers, teaching each to understand and work with the other's unique approaches. Dr. Tanaka's xenolinguistics team made breakthroughs in understanding how resonant harmonic communication could be partially replicated using human technology, while the resonants learned to modify their natural crystalline interfaces to better accommodate human users. It's not just about technology, Harrison observed one day, watching a young human engineer work with a resonant to calibrate a new hybrid shield generator. We're creating a new culture here, aren't we? Azure's surface shimmered with what they now recognized as pleased agreement. The harmony of differences. Like the musical concept of counterpoint, separate melodies that create something greater when played together. The station grew and evolved, its design continuously refined by the combined insights of both species. The hybrid power core that the saboteurs had targeted became the model for a new generation of energy systems, while the shield technology born during the solar storm was developed into a standard safety feature for all joint operations. More importantly, Harmony Point became a symbol of possibility. Despite the ongoing concerns and occasional resistance from both sides, it stood as living proof that different species could not only coexist but thrive together. Each crisis, each challenge, only served to demonstrate the strength of their alliance. As Harrison stood in the observation dome once again, watching the endless dance of construction and cooperation outside, she reflected on how far they'd come from that first desperate rescue attempt. The universe had brought them together in crisis, but they had chosen to stay together in harmony. 1 year after the establishment of Harmony Point, Captain Harrison received the call that would put everything they'd built to the ultimate test. The emergency signal came from a joint colonial venture on Kepler 186f, a pioneering settlement where humans and resonance were attempting to build a shared world. "We've detected a rogue asteroid on a collision course with the colony," the colonial governor's hologram reported, her face grave. "Our calculations show it's large enough to trigger an extinction-level event. Traditional deflection methods aren't an option, it's too close and moving too fast." Beside her, a resonant elder's surface pulsed with urgent patterns that the translation system rendered as, "The impact will destroy not just our settlement, but any chance of future habitation. We have less than 72 hours. Harrison looked around the emergency conference room at Harmony Point. Azure, Titanium, Patel, and Dr. Tanaka sat with her, along with representatives from both species' scientific communities. The last year had transformed them from crisis-forged allies into something closer to family. "Show us the data," Harrison said, and multiple holographic displays sprang to life, merging human analytical models with resonant harmonic visualizations. The situation was even worse than initially reported. The asteroid was actually a cluster of metallic bodies, held together by complex gravitational interactions. Traditional mining explosives or deflection methods would only split it into multiple deadly projectiles. "But look at the composition," Azure pointed out, its surface flickering with inspiration. "The metallic content, it's similar to the crystalline matrices we use in our power systems." Patel leaned forward, his eyes widening. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Using the asteroid itself as a conductor?" "Not just a conductor," Titanium added, its patterns growing more complex with excitement. "A resonance amplifier. If we can establish the right harmonic frequency." Dr. Tanaka was already running simulations. "We'd need unprecedented power levels, and a way to project the resonance field over astronomical distances." "Harmony Point," Harrison said suddenly. "The entire station, it's the largest hybrid power system ever built. If we reconfigure it." The plan that emerged was either brilliant or insane, probably both. They would transform Harmony Point itself into a massive resonance projector, using its hybrid human resonant technology to establish a harmonic connection with the asteroid's metallic components. The resonance would provide the precise frequency control needed, while human technology would supply the raw power to project it across space. "This goes beyond anything we've attempted," Admiral Chen's hologram warned during the emergency briefing. "You're talking about turning an entire space station into an experimental weapon." "Not a weapon," Harrison corrected. "A tool. Like everything else we've built together." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Every human and resonant aboard the station worked tirelessly, reconfiguring systems and establishing new power pathways. The hybrid core that had once been targeted by saboteurs now became the heart of their effort, its capacity pushed to theoretical limits. Resonance spread throughout the station's superstructure, their crystalline bodies forming living conduits for the enormous energies they would need to channel. Human engineers worked alongside them, their technology providing the framework and control systems that would make precision possible at astronomical scales. As the deadline approached, Harrison stood in the modified control center, surrounded by displays showing their target and the endangered colony. "All teams report ready," she announced, looking at the assembled faces, human and resonant, around her. "Power systems at maximum capacity," Patel reported. "Core stability holding at 98%. Resonance patterns aligned," Azure added, its surface glowing with focused energy. "All resonant conduits in position. Colonial sensors confirm asteroid approaching final targeting window," Dr. Tanaka said. "We'll only get one shot at this." Harrison took a deep breath. "Begin power-up sequence." The station hummed with energy as the hybrid core spun up to full power. Throughout the structure, resonance began their harmonic resonance, their crystalline bodies glowing with contained power. Human technology regulated and directed the flow, preventing overload as the energy built to unprecedented levels. Target locked, Patel called out. Resonance field forming. Through the observation windows, they could see the effect, a massive, shimmering field of energy extending out from the station like a focused aurora. The resonance harmonic control gave it structure and precision that would have been impossible with human technology alone. Impact in 5 minutes, Tanaka reported. Field strength at 85% of calculated requirement. We need more power, Harrison said. Everything we've got left. That's when Azure made its move. Without warning, it interfaced directly with the station's core, its crystalline form serving as a living bridge between the human and resonant systems. Other resonants followed suit, pushing their abilities to the absolute limit. They're manually synchronizing the power fluctuations, Patel exclaimed. Evening out the resonance patterns at a quantum level. The energy field strengthened visibly, its color shifting to a deep, purposeful purple. When it struck the asteroid cluster, the effect was unlike anything they'd seen before. Instead of a violent impact, there was a moment of perfect harmony as the metallic bodies began to resonate with the applied field. It's working. Tanaka called out. The cluster is beginning to destabilize. They watched in awe as the asteroid cluster began to break apart, not in random chunks, but in a controlled dissolution guided by the resonance field. What had been a planet-killing projectile became a spreading cloud of metallic dust, its trajectory altered just enough to miss the colony completely. The celebration that followed transcended species barriers. Humans and resonance together had accomplished something neither could have done alone, saving thousands of lives and preserving the future of their joint colony. In the aftermath, as systems were powered down and damage reports compiled, Harrison found herself again in the observation dome with Azure and Titanium. The metallic debris cloud was visible as a glittering ribbon across the stars, a testament to what they'd achieved. When we first met, Harrison said, during that emergency rescue, did you ever imagine we'd end up here? Azure's surface rippled with what they now knew was their equivalent of laughter. In crisis, we found harmony. In harmony, we found strength. And in strength, we found a future neither of us could have imagined alone. Titanium added, its patterns thoughtful, perhaps that is the greatest discovery our peoples have made, that the universe is not just stranger than we imagine, but more wonderful when we imagine it together. As Harrison looked out at the stars, she realized that their story, the story of humans and resonance, was just beginning. They had moved from crisis to cooperation, from cooperation to community, and now they stood ready to face whatever challenges the universe had in store, secure in the knowledge that they were stronger together than apart. The legacy of their partnership would echo across the stars, a testament to what different species could achieve when they chose to embrace their differences and find harmony in diversity. It was a lesson that would shape the future of both their civilizations, and perhaps serve as a beacon for others who might follow in their footsteps.